Interrupt all the happy voices. Love that. Okay, so we are continuing. The kingdom of God is like. And spending the first majority of the class talking about the kingdom parables. Just as a quick review, parables compare a physical to the spiritual. There's usually some easy-to-understand story that lays alongside a spiritual truth or has a spiritual meaning. Obviously, we're focusing on those parables that are about the kingdom, and that was the topic, I believe, if I remember from the first week, the number was like 13 out of 43 parables that Jesus told started as a, this is the kingdom of God, or this is the kingdom of heaven. So we talked about what is the kingdom. We developed the concept of the kingdom through the Old Testament and how the Jews were looking for a Messiah or a deliverer who would come and establish an earthly kingdom. And as Jesus said, his kingdom is not of this world. So it is ultimately a heavenly kingdom, hence our title. The kingdom of heaven is like in many of the parables. But we said that the kingdom exists where God's will is being done, where the followers of God are obeying him. So the kingdom currently exists in two different dimensions. One in heaven, where he is with the angelic and other heavenly beings, and then here on earth as the church that was established on Pentecost. And ultimately, those two dimensions will merge at the end of time, at least as we know it. There will be a reckoning, a judgment, without getting into that whole topic. But at the end of time, the church on earth will be united with the kingdom in heaven. And these parables that we've been looking at are describing in a couple of ways. In some ways, they describe more of the heavenly aspect of it. But in many ways, they describe the earthly kingdom, and certainly more than one of them talk about that uniting of the two phases or the two dimensions of the kingdom. Some of the parables we've talked about so far, we've learned things like the kingdom affects the world by being in it and permeating through it and influencing it. The kingdom includes both sincere and insincere people. And as the parable of the dragnet indicated, it will be purified. There will be some separation of those. The kingdom is open to all. We talked about the parable of the feast and how the invitation was sent to everyone. And then we talked about the parable of the talents last week, where people in the kingdom are expected to bear fruit. They're expected to be active and growing and producing something for God. Excuse me, the pollen's really getting to me this week. So today we're going to be talking about, I skipped it on the title slide, 3 parables. The first couple are here on these verses and from Matthew 13. The parable of the treasure, or sometimes called the hidden treasure, and the parable of the pearl. More poetic translations would probably have a heading such as the pearl of great price or something like that. So we'll be talking about those. Couple of short readings here. If you've got those, would you chime in with those? 1344.
The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which man found and covered up. Then, in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field.
Okay, and then the next one, 44 and 46, or 45 and 46.
Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking a beautiful pearl, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it.
Okay, thank you. So we have a specifics unknown treasure that was found, and then a pearl that was one of great value. You know, this was a pearl merchant, someone who bought and sold, and when he saw it, he recognized it for its, and I can't go technical on pearls, but for its beauty, for its purity, for its color. Well, you know, the things that precious stones and pearls are known for. So he recognized it as something of great value. What do these two short stories have in common? Yes, both of them, certainly. The kingdom of God is like. Okay, great value. Heard something over here.
Yeah, I mean, it enforces the fact that the kingdom is worth more than anything else they could find, and when they find it, it's worth giving up everything to get it.
Yes, and we're going to come back to that one. He said that, you know, the kingdom is of such great value that it's worth giving up everything they have for it. You know, it's not just, wow, that's a nice car. I bet that cost a pretty penny. That is the most precious thing I have ever seen. I will sell everything I have to get that. So yeah, it's a great value. Any other commonalities between those stories? Okay, they're very short. It's hard to dig too deep into these. A couple of interesting differences, maybe. What are the differences in those stories where one man found a treasure in the field and one merchant found a beautiful pearl? What's different? Tracy?
I think in the treasure in the field, he just kind of found it, versus the pearl, they were actually searching and looking for it.
Yes. One of them was apparently accidental, or at least semi-accidental, certainly in contrast to the other one who, that's what he did. He went out and searched and bought and sold and searched for the best he could find. So yeah, that was definitely a difference. And I think for where we're going today, probably the main thing. Any other differences? Okay, that's fine. I'm not sure I could name many. Let's talk about, oh, go ahead.
The difference is one's hidden, the other's out in plain view. And
Yes.
yet both recognize the value. And maybe with the second one, if somebody else had recognized the value, they would have bought it, but he recognized the value. Even though it's in plain view.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of them was somewhat hidden, and the other was in plain view. Actually, let's go with that. The pearl was in plain view. Did everybody place the same amount of value on that pearl? No. Why did this guy think it was such, think that it warranted selling everything that he had? Go ahead.
Actually, everybody may have placed the same value on it. He's the only one that took action.
Okay.
Which I think that's relevant, right? Because if you look at the kingdom of heaven, a lot of people would say they recognize the value, but narrow is the gate. Mm-hmm. So only few are going to take action.
Right. I actually wrote down the comparison. On the surface, two words sound very much the same, but have that built into it: cost versus value. Many may have recognized, man, that pearl costs a lot, but they didn't value it. You know, it wasn't enough to them to take action on it. So yeah, there's a little difference between just a monetary cost and the value that it had. And for this guy, the pearl had extreme value, Tracy.
The field, when the man found it, he covered it up.
Well, it was originally covered up.
But instead of, like it.
Okay, so let's tackle that one. This actually, for years, has been a parable that I've had. Whenever I read it, I have to think twice about it. So two ways to look at it. One way, the guy finds the treasure for legitimate reasons. Maybe he was hired to go plow the field. Maybe he was looking at it to examine it for some other reason. But maybe he was taking a shortcut through the field. Maybe it was just an empty field, and he said, hey, it's a shorter path to get from here to there. So whatever reason, he accidentally found it. Now, he could have stolen it. He could have just whatever that treasure was. And man, I wish we knew what the treasure actually was. He could have just taken it, right? He could have just taken it, but instead, he left it where it was, and he went, and it says, of course, we talk about he gave everything he had so that he could buy the field. Okay, that's one way to look at it. What about the other way? Well, the guy's not really being on the up and up. Is that ethical? Is he disclosing to the owner of the field the true value? So I've had trouble with that for years, but I'm probably just, we talked at the beginning about parables, about you can overanalyze and put too much. I'm probably just doing that, okay? But yes, it goes back to, he found it by accident. I think the important thing is he recognized the value, and he was willing to go to great lengths to own it. Actually, I had a note here, something else that crossed my mind. The guy in the field with the treasure. This man acquired the treasure. What do most people do with the treasure? What benefit do they get from owning it?
Where they can see it and enjoy it.
Okay, there's the personal enjoyment. I'm sorry? Show it to others. What?
Sell it.
Sell it, yes. Tracy? Yeah. An unspecified treasure, to me, maybe that's a hunk of precious metal ore. I don't know. Something that I can buy this field, I will own it. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was a vein of something he could mine. I don't know. But I could own this and use it for monetary benefit. I can sell it. I can spend it. So there's that usage of it. But yes, some of y'all named things. The man with the pearl. What's he going to do with it? If he sells it, he recognized it as so valuable and he wanted to have it. If he sells it, he doesn't have it anymore. I mean, it's one pearl. You can't divide it up. You can't, I guess you could sell an interest in it, but that's maybe not all that profitable. But yeah, there's a little difference there. One person wanted the pearl just because they recognized it was something so wonderful that they wanted to have. And the other person had some treasure that it was valuable and perhaps could be used, could provide for his family, whatever. So there are some differences. Mm-hmm.
One, the first one is dealing with an inanimate object. The second one is dealing with an animate object. You have the kingdom of heaven is like treasure that's hidden. Then the second says the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking. So in the first one, the man wasn't seeking for it, he just found it.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, you have a man seeking for it, he finds it. So it really gives you an example
Yes.
And some people stumble upon Christ, and they see how valuable that is.
Okay, we'll go on to our next parable now. No, really, I did want to bring that out, so thank you, Keith. I think that's the difference here between searching and finding, is you do see people that come into the kingdom in all different ways. Some of them are looking, and they might not even know what they're searching for at the beginning, but they're searching. Tracy?
Maybe the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant. Maybe the merchant is actually God searching for us, who sold all he had to buy us, which was his son.
Wow. A different twist on it I've not read before. Maybe we're the pearls. Maybe we're the pearls and God is the merchant. Okay, I'm going to have to go back and look at this again this week. Wow, I don't know where to go from there now. Okay, so why don't we maybe move on a little bit? Because that's maybe a great ending point on these. Some of the really incredible things about these stories, I didn't count the words here, but I don't know, 36 words or something there, 2 stories, and look at all the meaning that it has. So the power behind the parables, the stories that Jesus told. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, we should talk about that. Without getting too personal, if you want to, that's fine. But have you or do you know someone who has given up much to be a part of the church? Some of us do. I mean, honestly, I haven't. I can't say that I have, other than, just the everyday things and the priorities. But some people, especially family-wise, I've known of people that had to give up their family. They were disowned when they became members of the church. So yeah, some people like Paul, he would have been a great leader among the Jews, but he gave it up to get beaten and shipwrecked and can't even name all of it. So that's a good example. Go ahead.
The gentleman that taught me the gospel, a beautiful wife and wonderful Christian woman, he got in a car accident and changed personality. The injury to her brain. Divorced him, and he did not skip a beat. Kept preaching the gospel. He preached for another almost 58 years.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And he died last year. He never looked back. But his 2 sons are great preachers.
Oh, that's wonderful. Interesting stories. So, there are definite stories, and we hear about some that give up a lot to follow Jesus. No, we're going to move on. Will you go ahead?
Just keeping thought in verse 44, it's a treasure that's hidden. In verse 45, it's a merchant that's seeking. And in verse 47, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragon that was cast into the sea. So you have one person that stumbles upon the gospel, another person that's seeking the gospel. Now the kingdom is a dragon that pulls all sorts of people in, and then they separate.
Right. Right, so we talked about the dragnet on the first week, and that you bring out an interesting progression in that these are right there, back to back to back, with those three different ways of coming into the kingdom. Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you, Keith.
Just wanted to follow on, you were talking about the what we give up, and you said you didn't give up much, but I think that a lot of people do, like you said, and I think that Jesus said that's the way it's going to be, right? So in Matthew 10, when he's sending out the 12, he's talking about all this disruption that's going to happen, and that they need to, not worry about it because it's him, not them, right? But he ends up talking about, you think I came to bring peace? No, right? I came to bring division. A sword to divide people, right? Father against son, mother against daughter, all this stuff. There's a lot of, when someone sees that value and others don't, that causes a division, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Jesus brought.
Yeah. So the reference to, you said Matthew 10, where Jesus says, we're going to pit, father against son, brother against brother, that it will cause division. So he's pointing out, some of you will have to give up, your family. It will not be necessarily a peace, but he's coming to separate, whether it be the sheep from the goats in whatever it is, 24 or 25 chapter, or, brother against brother. There is a division between the people who follow God and the people that don't. So a couple of just kind of concluding things. This certainly doesn't cover everything that we've said. But from these two parables, the kingdom is not obvious to everyone. Some people are searching for it. Some people stumble upon it by accident. But even then, not everybody realizes the value. So it's the value is not obvious either. But in truth, the kingdom is worth everything you have. Okay, so the parable of the debt. This will be from Matthew 18. And we'll actually read the parable in a couple of minutes. But I wanted to set the stage for the context. At the beginning of Matthew 18, Peter says, at that time, the disciples came to Jesus, not just Peter. Peter comes up later, sorry. The disciples came up and said, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And then there's a lot of teaching following that in chapter 18. So the disciples are still in it's going to be an earthly kingdom kind of stage, and they're expecting, we're going to be important in this kingdom. So who's the greatest? There was another passage where the mother of James and John said, I want my sons to sit at your right and left hand. So there was all this focus on the kingdom and who would be greatest in the kingdom. And then a little later in chapter 18 there, in verse 21, Peter came to him and said, "Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times?" And the response, a whole lesson in and of itself, Jesus says, up to 70 times 7. What do you think was on Peter's mind after this discussion of who's going to be greatest? He says, Should I forgive 7 times?
Doing more than what the tradition was. The tradition is 3 times.
Yes.
And he thought he was adding on, and I'm great now because I added 4 more. And Jesus kind of just gives them a biblical number that means something to Jews. That 4 nothing means forever.
That's right. Peter's saying, will this make me great in the kingdom? I'll forgive more than the required 3 times. I'm going to forgive 7 times. So here's the stage for our parable when Jesus says, no, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Some translations will say 77. And again, we could go into great length and talk about, the meaning of the numbers. There was some symbolism that many at that time would have had about the number 7 and about the number 10. So 70 is 7 times 10. Go ahead.
So the few verses before, starting at 15 through 20, is what begins, what prompts Peter's question. This is what we commonly use for church discipline, if you will. It's, take one, go talk to your brother if he's offended you, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole discourse on how to deal with a sinning brother or brother that has wronged you. And remember, that's what prompts Peter's question is, okay, if you had a brother that's, go talk to him about it. Take 2 or 3 witnesses, take it to the church, and then kind of disown him, if you will. But then Peter comes with the question, how often should I forgive my brother? Given all of this, how often should I forgive my brother?
That's good. So the context also includes how to deal with someone who has caused an offense of some sort. So that's a good lead-in, actually, to where we're going to go. But there's our context for a parable that is going to be the kingdom of heaven is like. So here's where I left out a verse, a reading verse. Matt, you have, I think it starts in verse 23 in Matthew 18.
Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with the servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded that he be sold, with his wife and children and all that he had, so that the payment should be made. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt. But that servant then went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And he laid his hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay you all. And he would not, but went and threw him into prison till he would pay the debt.
Okay, thank you. And then whoever has verses 31 to 35. Finish that off, please.
So when his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were deeply grieved and came and reported to their Lord all that had happened. Then summoning him, his Lord said to him, You wicked slave, I forgave you all debt because you entreated me. Should you not also have had mercy on your fellow slave, even as I had mercy on you? And his Lord, moved with anger, handed him over to the torturers until he could repay all that was owed him. So shall my heavenly Father also do to you, if each of you does not forgive his brother from your heart.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in the context of we have someone who has sinned against me, and, should I forgive 7 times? More than is necessary? And Jesus says, no, essentially he says, give more times than you can count. Then he says, for this reason, the kingdom of heaven is like. Let's think about this one. So the king is settling accounts with his servants, similar to last week when we talked about the servants who were given various amounts of money, 5, 2, and 1 talent to deal with. The servant was entrusted with care of a sum of money. How many talents does this one say? 10,000. Now, last week we were talking about how a talent was worth quite a bit, and that, 1 talent was a good bit of money, and 2 and 5 were even more. Now we've got 10,000 talents. Again, depends on who you ask, it'll say a different amount of money. But last week we said, okay, a talent could have been, say, 20 years' wages, or maybe it was $1 million. So now we've got 10,000 talents. That's billions of dollars in equivalence to us. So he doesn't have it. He doesn't have the billions of dollars that was entrusted to him. So I think we can go back and we can think about last week's parable right alongside of this, where, certainly a servant could have some reservations about risking that, but he was still expected to produce something. Can you raise your hand? Okay. But then he goes to the one who owes him some money. And it was 100 denarii. Commonly said, a denarius was about how much? About a day's wages. So 100 would have been some portion of a year. In today's dollars, based on average salary, a few $1,000s. I mean, not something to. It's not pocket change, but it's nowhere close to the billions that he had lost and not been able to return to the master. What did the master expect from the servant? What did he expect from him at the very beginning? He expected the talents back, right? When he didn't get it, what did he expect? When the talent fell down and said, what did he say? When the servant fell down and said, what did he say? Yeah, have patience, I'll repay. What's the likelihood he could have paid billions of dollars back? He wasn't going to pay billions of dollars back. It was basically, will you forgive me? I can't do anything. There's nothing I can do that will restore what I've cost you. So the master forgave him. Now, what did the master expect from that same servant? There you go. That he would treat others the same way he had been treated. So, a few thousand, a couple of billion, you could say it's all the same. Just like the 5 talents and the 1 talent. The 5-talent servant last week had 10 to return to the master. The servant with 1 talent wasn't expected to return 10 to the master. He was expected to return something. And this week, the servant that had lost the enormous sum of money, he was forgiven, and he was expected to also forgive. Now, it's interesting that Jesus follows this parable up. Remember, the kingdom of heaven is like. Then he describes it. And then, personally, I get the feeling this goes directed back to Peter or the disciples. Because, here's where he's driving home the lesson. That here's the kingdom of heaven, here's the story, here's the parallel, and then he says, my heavenly Father will also do the same to you if each of you does not forgive his brother from your heart. And what can we learn from that?
So much. And so what is it for us to show that same forgiveness to others? I mean, you think about in Second Peter, when Peter was telling the different things we need to add into our faith, you think some of the things there, it talks about self-control and patience and brotherly kindness and love. You need those types of things to be able to forgive. But part of it is also realizing how much God has forgiven us so that we can show that to others. If we don't value and recognize how much God has forgiven us, it's quite difficult for people to be forgiving when they don't recognize that.
That's right. Every one of us is that servant, and God has forgiven each of us enormous things. Tracy.
Read through this and back to what Mark was saying. The Bible didn't have these little dividers. You know, that first little section you said about, I do not say, you know, Jesus said 70 times 7, but he has just had this whole discussion about what is something wrong. And then Peter basically is saying, hey, how many times do I do this? And Jesus kind of slaps him in the face by saying, I have forgiven you so much, and you're missing the point of what this whole thing is about. It's about the fact that you can be forgiven more than you could ever repay. And it's kind of his way of saying, you're missing the point. And we look at this in sections versus it's a whole, you know, whole thing that was put together. Versus, you know, the little parts that we break up.
So if you take the 7, becomes 70 times 7, which is more than you can count. And then tack that onto each one of us is that person that has been forgiven. Have we counted up how many times God has forgiven us? I would venture to say it's more than 490. It's going to be in that more times than you can count area. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important also to look at this in terms of the consequences. The consequences is illustrated here really well. One, you got total forgiveness, and this is what we've talked about so far, of something that, you know, Jesus is using a hyperbole to illustrate just how big this is, but it's full forgiveness of a debt.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, you see, you know, choking and thrown into prison of the servant. And then it ends with, okay, therefore I'm going to deliver you, you wicked servant, to the torturer
Mm-hmm.
in death. And I think that's figurative for the judgment.
Right.
Which we know. And so I think it's important to read Romans 3:23 and 24. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We quote that so often. But the next verse is really important. Being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God set forth as a propitiation by his blood through faith to demonstrate the righteousness. Because in this forbearance, God had passed over the sins that were previously committed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that settling of accounts really is all about our sins.
Yep.
And there's a natural settlement of account that can only be, you know, through forgiveness or being thrown into prison and torture.
Yep. That's right. It's, you know, maybe, well, I've got 4 minutes. Bringing that back to 2 things to wind things up. One is, yeah, that's ultimately about judgment. It's ultimately about, you know, the depiction of the church and the heavenly kingdom being united in heaven. And this is who God accepts and who God does not. But then let's come back to what Mark mentioned of, you know, the description of how to handle when someone has sinned against me. one of the comments here from our author that I'm pulling from says, offenses are possible in the kingdom. When you're looking at the kingdom as the church, we're all human. We're all going to sin, and we're all going to cause offense to our brothers and sisters around us. So all this tacked together, like you said, there's not, I'm only going to read this section under this heading. All of this was sequential when Matthew wrote it down. So we have one thing flowing into another. So offenses are possible in the kingdom, and mercy is the answer.
There's a little bit of a difference here in the way this lays out the technical aspects of how to conduct, like I say, kind of church discipline. But this, and then it goes into the forgiveness discussion. Remember, the reason we conduct church discipline is not so that we can throw people out of the church. The reason we conduct church discipline is out of love, because the point is to get people to realize, yes, I messed up, and I need to come back. And so we often get caught up in we just need to get these people out of here. That's not the point of church discipline.
Right.
And so it really kind of falls into this forgiving our brother, 490 times, from the standpoint that this is not about, they've messed up for the last time, I'm not forgiving them. That's not what it's saying. It's saying we need to bring them back to a point of reconciliation. And that's where, we get sometimes confused on the whole church discipline thing from the standpoint of forgiveness. It's conducted in love, not in revenge.
Right. So the process of I honestly hate the phrase church discipline, but what else are you going to call it? But that is for the sake of the sinner, to bring them back. This discussion Jesus is having is for the sake of the one who is sinned against. This is important for your heart. You should have mercy on the one who offended you.
And that's kind of what I was trying to say is, it's about mercy, to your point, and church discipline is not about anger. It's about mercy. It's mercy to the point of love, in that we care about you, we want you to come back, but you need that 2x4 upside of your head to understand what you've done wrong.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So, this is a huge theme for Jesus, right? He touches this in so many different ways, from so many different angles, and we've talked about a bunch of them. But he starts this in the model prayer, right? He says, this is what you should pray for, right? Forgive me as I forgive those who sinned against me, right?
Mm-hmm.
To paraphrase. And that's a theme throughout, is the forgiveness, right? Because that's what we need. And that's what we need to give.
That's it. Maybe we'll end on that. Mark was saying that, over and over, this is the theme of Jesus' teaching from the model prayer, forgive me as I forgive others. Yeah, we're out of time. We're good. We've said all this. It was just a summary. See you next week.